I'm Marlene, and I run the Devon Allergy Clinic. I am a registered nurse, and I've got a diploma in allergy. So I am an allergy nurse, but also I still work for the NHS in the community as a short bowel nurse. So I look after people who we feed intravenously. It's a whole team of us. They've been through a very long journey. They decide, the only rate they can live really is to have fluid straight in their vein. So we bypass all their gut.
Really?
And they're great. They're not victims. They're wonderful people. They select the ones which you can do this at home. They're out working. They're doing things. So I know guts from way up here to most of us bumbling around the bottom. I trained at the Monash University for the FODMAP diet because I got so fed up with GPs when people went to their doctors talking about tummy. Do the FODMAP diet and giving them one piece of paper, and the guidelines say to deliver a FODMAP diet, you need to be a registered dietitian, which I am not. And have a qualification in FODMAPs, which I could get because I was a nurse.
So FODMAP diet.
FODMAPs is fermentable polysaccharides. It sugar.
Okay.
Sugars which ferment in your gut in the wrong place at the wrong time and the wrong sugars. And there's lots of different sugars out there. But none of this is rocket science, really, when it comes to it. So that, and then I just finished doing the Monash gastro diet for this year. So these are all, this was based on IBS, maybe Crohn's as well. But this is basically people who have been. So, what do I look at? I look at potential allergies, hypersensitivities, intolerances, and digestive disorders. What nurse does all that mean? What actually is an allergy? Because a lot of people come to me, say, I'll eat this, think I'm allergic. And of course, allergy is not that at all. And we've got 3 criteria on the NHS for an allergic response. It's immediate. So you're going to get your symptoms within a few minutes and a few hours. Those symptoms will always be reproducible. So every time you touch, eat, and the classic is hay fever. If you sniff that pollen and you've got hay fever, something's going to give. And the third one, it engages our immune system. And this is what we call the IgE, or immunoglobulin T response. And we got 2 tests for that on the NHS, an IgE blood test and a skin prick test. But there are things called false positives and false negatives, so no testing is perfect. So if you go to your GP and say, I'd like an allergy test, and he says, or she says, or they say, we don't do that. Rubbish. They could do it if they chose to do it. It's just what do you do with it? When you test something, you've got to do something with the outcome, haven't you? You can't just say, I'm allergic to dairy. That's not helpful to anyone. You just go off in another fog, don't you? So that's the allergy. Now, the next step down from, and that's all we really look at on the NHS, IgE. And these are people potentially can go into anaphylaxis, symptoms of allergy, bit of history about these allergies. When mankind was developing millennia ago, it was a filthy old world full of parasites. And if those parasites got inside of us, it couldn't do us any good, does it, as a species? So our immune system emerged and created a tiny little white cell called a mast cell. And the aim of this little mast cell, whenever it came across a big old parasite, it exploded or degranulated. And out of it came some horribly irritant chemicals to kill this parasite. One of those is histamine. So you take antihistamines. And because they're very nasty and irritant, these chemicals, they cause inflammation. So people take steroids because they're anti-inflammatory. People with eczema on their skin, asthma, inhalers. Now, bring this on now to the 21st century Western world we live in. Not very heavy on parasites anymore. We've cleaned our act up. But there is a genetic component, which we can pass it on from family, but now a huge environmental component. In some people, these wretched little mast cells are pretty much like the SAS. Bring on the parasites, we're here, let's do our job. And of course, there's nothing present to kill, is there? Then they go a bit rogue and turn all things. And the big things they turn on are certain foods, cats and dogs, and animal den. Did I can have an analogy clinic with a dog, I'm wondering. Cats and dogs, house dust mites, pollens, and moths. So if we can find out what's making this little mast cell explode, a heck of a lot more control about what's going on. Now, these little cells hang out in our body. They don't circulate in our blood like most of our cells do. They hang out in our tissues. Where the outside world gets into us, they're our first responders. So you've got plenty of access points on the head for them to lurk around. So you end up with your rhinitis, your runny nose, conjunctivitis, blue ears, headaches, migraines, the upper airways, which is what we call this postnasal direct with your friend book. The lower airways, which is your asthma, the wheeze, the whole of the skins, you get your eczema, psoriasis, rashes, niches, angioedemas, and urticaria, and the gut. So what do you say if you say, what's my gut? Got to do with a runny nose, got to do with an itchy skin. In my world, everything. Except for gut, they'll shove you to gastro. For skin, you go to dermatology. For runny noses, you might end up at ENT, and nobody talks to each other. No. It's called the silo effect, which is really not helpful. So that's allergy in the IgE blood, and that's what we look at, immunoglobulin E. IgE, immunoglobulin E, and that's the only one which counts on the NHS. You can get IgG, you can get all these other immunofactors, but it's the IgE for allergy. Of course, there's another step below IgE, which can give you all those symptoms. Big difference. It doesn't make the mast cell explode. It engages the immune system on a very different level. And that's why I use the machine I do, because once it's calibrated, all this machine says the body doesn't like it. So from the patient's history, my education, and then the results, we can get a good idea of what's going on, why it's going on, and more importantly, what you can do about it. Intolerances, now we're looking at the gut a bit. And the one most people have heard about is lactose intolerance. And here we are physically not making one digestive enzyme called lactase to break down milk sugars lactose. And this is the belchy, bloaty, painful stuff going on and loose bowels. And of course, the very trendy bit, the gut health. And we hear gut health all over the place. There's so projects, people talking about the twins, the doctors, everyone, Michael Mosley. And it was interesting. I had a couple in the other day and his wife, and he said, I told her it was gut health. And I said, well, what's gut health? He said, a healthy gut. And I said, what do you think of a healthy gut? He says, a little yogurt drinks. Probably not. Probably not. I said, there's nothing wrong. And the Yakult, the people who make these little yogurt drinks, brilliant educators, really brilliant sessions we've had with them. But gut health is intriguing, really, and we've only just, I work in gastroenterology, and we look at the actual line of the gut. We rarely look at the microbes in the gut. This is the trendy bit. Now, when it comes to these microbes, we're actually physically outnumbered on them on a 10-to-1 ratio in their favor. So we are 1 cell human, 10 cells other things. The other things are a lot smaller, otherwise we'd look remarkably odd. This host of microbes, again, were on planet Earth way before we were. And when mankind, and there's a whole host of them, there's a whole diversity. There's bacteria, viruses, phages, vermiculates, fungus, yeast, protozoas. And when mankind started emerging, they hopped into us and basically said, ooh, nice place to live. But instead of being the bad boy, like Cody, this flock became the good boys. And we call them commensals. And I call them our private NHS, because without them, we're not nearly as healthy as we should be. I started off in allergy, and a lot of things didn't make sense to me. And it wasn't until I got pulled back into gastroenterology, and I had to study a lot about the gut, that the light switch went on, actually. It's because the gut is hugely important. If you think about it, we think about our skin as an outside layer, don't we? Well, the gut is outside. It goes through our mouths to our bottom, and it's this tube. And that poor gut, because you may have heard people say, I have a second brain there's a second brain in the gut. Well, actually, if you think about it logically, in evolutionary terms, the gut was when you see a group of cells together, they haven't got a brain, but they've often got a little gut tract, a little tube, and that gut has to say good, bad, good, bad, good, bad, don't they? Oh, I know, breathing the. Check that by that. So, yeah, she'd like a room there. So, this is a whole mishmash, and it doesn't make sense, does it? But actually, it truly does, because it's all to do with the gut lining, this. And it's probably A-level anatomy of the gut, not difficult at all. Because if you think of our gut, I mean, you may have heard of leaky gut. Yeah. So, leaky gut, we call it. The NHS call it gut permeability. Yeah. Same thing. You may have heard the word candida. The NHS call that gut dysbiosis. And it was funny. There was there's a professor called Tim Spector, and he did a lot of work. He ran something called the Zoe Project, which was a very expensive thing, and he gave a lecture because he was at King's, and he was saying, if I say to my colleagues, my learned colleagues, Candida, if I say gut dysbiosis, they go, oh. The same thing, really, except. So that's this. So allergy is the runny nose, the itchy skins. Believe it or not, all of that is directly involving the gut as well. Yes, that's really bizarre. So Candida, which we mentioned this word, because Candida was probably first met. We talk about Candida in the NHS at a high level. If you've got transplants, if you had chemotherapy, if you've got big autoimmune diseases, my patients with short bowel syndrome, they will have Candida. One of our gastroenterologists said they've all got leaky gut and Candida. So, but when it came to the bumbling along the bottom bit like us, must have been over 40 years ago, I think Candida was first mentioned, but it wasn't by a medic. It was by a hugatory person, and doctors don't like hugatory people. So that was kicked out as, the Antichrist. In the last 10 years, with the research on this gut microbiome, you can't say that anymore at all, because the research on that proves that there is an imbalance of these microbes. And when you've got, say a good balance in our gut of these bugs would be, or microbes, would be, they're all, funny thing about microbes, they're all over us and in us. The skin's got its own microbiome, our brain's got it, they're everywhere. But the vast majority of them in our gut. And a healthy balance of these gut microbiome would be, say, 80% good boys, 20% other things. Now, the other things, bless them, are not all bad, but we would like them in the right place, doing the right thing. Now, if you don't have enough of the good boys, other things grow. Now, in the hospital or in the community where I give IV antibiotics, vicious little pathogen called C. difficile can raise its ugly head, and this is chronic diarrhea and vomiting. Treatment of choice now for C. diff is fecal transplants. So they're literally taking poo from healthy people, shoving it down a tube into the gut. And some of my nursing patients have this. And I was talking to one of the team at one of the hospitals who do it. And I said, "Oh, Georgie, where'd you get the poo from?" And she said, "It's ours." And I said, "Don't tell the patient." "Don't tell Fred, it's your consultant's poo ambling down there. But not appreciate." Okay, we're not up there. We are bumbling along the bottom. But again, you've got that slight imbalance. There's another quite aggressive little thing, a fungus called Candida, which then does a big growth spurt. And what it does then, it plonks itself quite happily, doesn't it, Ruth? Yeah, it does. I'm learning things now, yeah. On the gut lining. Now, I don't know if you remember in COVID, you used to see viruses and bacteria just breaking in half, didn't they? Cell division, they all here. Fungus is really a lot cleverer than that. It's an amazing microbes, these are. And what they do, because most of them are underground, They're basically a communication network between trees. Amazing stuff, fungus. But in our bodies, they they make little mycelium, little feelers out. And these feelers can literally pierce our gut lining. So instead of having the cells round together, what we call tight junctions, you can get teeny tiny little cracks and oozes. And then all the toxins in our poo, which is on its way out, dum-da-dum-da-dum, some of those can get through our gut lining into our bloodstream. And this can be the tiredness, the fatigue, the lack of joined up writing. I call it living on a dimmer switch. You are not the vital person you feel you should be. And you've been to your doctor, your hemoglobin's all right, your thyroid's all right, so you're fine. And yet you think, I'm not. I'm really rubbish, actually, And we can do things about that, because we've got the evidence, and NHS love evidence, robust and evidence-based. So that's where sort of the level I come in at, us bumbling along the bottom. Because if we can find out triggers, what's triggering things, take the triggers out, get the gut microbiome working again. Now, the great thing about our gut, it is the quickest regenerative area in our body. The cells of our gut lining come up fighting fit every 3 to 5 days. Wow, it's great. Those bones take about 7 years. Well, it's got our traction down there, really, hasn't it? It's always on that. It's always on the move and on the go and things. But so if you give the gut the right environment, the gut will do what it does best. As long as you haven't got any inflammatory bowel diseases or anything nasty, it will look after you and put the pieces of the jigsaw together. And it's like, and this is it. All symptoms, people come to me with random stuff, and you think, it's like having a jigsaw puzzle thrown in the air. But it's only because of my training that I can put the jigsaw puzzles together. And then it's not even rocket science, it just makes sense. It really does make sense. GPs, there's a word called functional medicine. It started in America, and it was started off in America, they have a very different NHS system, obviously, and chiropractors they're called doctors as well over there, and a lot of what we would call alternative people. And, the American, basically, doctors were run by drug societies. It is quite a cutthroat business over there, this. I mean, it's bad enough here. I think it's much worse over there. And they got this movement going, and it started off, it came over to the UK about 12 years ago. And again, it was run by chiropractors. And now, they're all medical doctors. They're all GPs, because GPs begin to realize, a lot of them, they're failing people. We're failing an awful lot of people who don't want to be off sick, can be off on long-term sick, I just want to feel better again. So, and if we can get the right food into our body, get the right microbes into our body, get a gut lining doing what it should do, your body is then going to be in the best place to do what it does best, look after you. And none of that is rocket science, is it? It's a mixture, isn't it? It's finding food triggers, it's getting the gut organized, it's getting the lining of the gut organized, it's putting all of those pieces of the jigsaw together, because a lot of people will say, let's just take a probiotic, and that's a bit of a nightmare, actually, isn't it, really? Because you go into a shop. So how did we get bugs in our gut? We ate them, basically. Well, we got some of them from birth, which is why and this is the first fecal transplant, because when you're born vaginally, we used to think we got the first tranche of these bugs from mum's vagina. We now know it's from mum's poo. Because if you're born vaginally, there's that piece of skin, remember, called the perineum, which the head hits, and literally the baby licks your mum's bum on the way out. First fecal transplant. You think, really, if you're born by a C-section,
You don't have
you
that.
don't get that. You get more of a skin one. Is it killing you? Absolutely not. But it's like putting foundations on, isn't it? You build a house on good foundations, you get straight walls and a good roof. Build it on dodgy foundations, you get cracks. Build it on a floodplain, you end up with anaphylaxis and big stuff. Most of us are built on cracks, really. And the 21st century has not been good for our gut at all. And I think take the big misdemeanor is gluten. Gluten is a protein in all our major grains. And if the disease that's associated is something called celiac disease, which is an autoimmune disease. And if you cut up a slice of bread into 140 pieces, it's the crumbs off the 140 piece which will put a celiac into a crisis. So it's so sensitive. We test for that on the NHS, but we can now get something, called non-celiac wheat sensitivity. And why is this? Because this is farming methods. So up to about 100 years ago, we had regional grains. So there were local grains, the farmer collected them, replanted them, swapped a few with mates and things, and that was it. And then we got the bread baskets of the world, the Central Europeans, the Americas, the Canadas, and just goes on and on and on. And we modified that grain to make it a monoculture. Well, the people that we did, didn't they? They did. And then when they did that, they also adapted the grain to make it have a lot more sugar, these things called fructans, and a lot more gluten, because the food industry likes sweet, fluffy food. And this modern wheat we're not good with. So does that begin to make all these odd random things? Yes, and begins to make a bit more sense, doesn't it? So if we can make sense out of it, we can change it. And we're talking about ultra high processed foods and ultra high processed drinks. Never had those.
Yeah.
At all, did we really? I mean, I was listening to a program talking about this the other day, and there was a young lad saying he was about 16, and he said, from the time I walked from my home to the bus stop to school, I've seen 6 things for either Coke, Pepsi, McDonald's, KFC. And what a thing that is, And then when we start eating it, I mean, they've been designed brilliantly.
They're addictive, after they, yeah.
And this is like smoking. So what happens when people smoke and they try to give up? What do they turn to? Food. And then they turned often to addictive food because it tastes nice, it gives you a quick buzz, and it's cheap. The organic meat doesn't have antibiotics in. Why do we give antibiotics to animals? That in my naivety, I actually thought it was to prevent illness, cramp conditions. Let's give them antibiotics, they will get sick. No, they put it to put on weight. And you think, well, how does that work? Because they kill the microbiome, and one of the jobs of the microbiome is to regulate weight. And here we go again. So it all comes back to this. Eczema, we're now looking at if you've got leaky gut, and that barrier's gone, there's things can cross there, these inflammatory markers called cytokines, and they hit another inflammatory marker called an interleukin, and then you get eczema all over you. In the old days, eczema was in your cracks, wasn't it? And why were they in the cracks? Because the microbiome of the skin, our skin is pretty arid, not a lot of things can live there, but in the cracks where it's dark and moist, stuff always likes living. And that's where that goes from as well. So we're beginning to, and this is no research. You say that to a dermatologist and they'll look at you, and yet I give a drug called Dupixent, and this is for severe eczema, and again, these targets the interleukins. But dermatology and it's all lotions and potions for eczema, isn't it?
There's steroids as well, which I think they're just thinning the skin. They're not strengthening.
But again, sort of the trend, I mean, they're looking a lot at eczema. Is eczema, the latest statement, is eczema an allergy? It could be. Does eczema cause allergies? Definitely. Now, why is that? And there was something, have you heard of peanut allergies? There was a big study that finished a year or so ago called the Eat and the Leap study. And this was all to do with children with peanut allergies. And it was early introduction. And they were literally shoveling peanuts down youngsters with severe uncontrolled conditions to desensitize them. They did. But on the back of that, they found out that children became allergic, not from eating the peanuts, but by 90% of them, they did, had active eczema, and the peanut protein went through the skin barrier and sensitized through the blood into the gut. And if you think about it, it just probably makes sense, really. But at a low level, you can look into this very deeply, can't you? There's lots of big words. But on the whole, I know. Yeah. But now there's evidence based on it. And we are now saying to children with eczema, take probiotics. Now that's interesting, isn't it, Kafir? Now, how do we get these in? We say we touch things, we get pickled truck plants, but also we fermented foods. And old people have been fermenting foods, and they keep us healthy because they produce microbes, okay? So, and this was still came on the back of the Berlin Wall coming down, this one. So when the Berlin Wall came down, you had the East, which was the peasants, having their peasant food and kefir and all that, and the West having McDonald's. Then the amount of allergies in the West was Berlin high, in the East low. The minute the wall came down, the West didn't go back eating traditional foods, did they? Nope. They went back. The East decided to eat McDonald's. Allergies went sky high.
Yeah, kefir has really helped me.
But kefir is excellent, but it can also be negative fermented foods, because there's a place called Darts Farm in Exeter, which has got a trendy. Yeah, and last year, before last, I think it was, they had a talk on. They had an expensive dinner, and there was 2 fermented foods per course, and I must have seen 6 people after that who weren't very well because their guts wasn't right in the first place to take all of this stuff. But if you get your guts right, then it's the healthiest way to get good bacteria in. Chicken soup, the bone broth, all the bones. Healthier than picture. But and it's this is old peasant food, which is so much healthier for us because they don't have additives and they do now.
Yeah, but it's about what you eat, isn't it? It's so important.
Yeah, it is very much about what we eat, but also the way how healthy. So if you're eating good kefir, but your gut's not quite ready for it, we need to get that.
I'm scared of kefir. It's true, actually, because I did this candida diet because I was in pain multiple times a week, and I don't know, but I can definitely feel improvements. Just whole foods.
Well, it's because you cut out sugar, really.
Yeah, I just dreaded vegetables, cook everything from scratch, but I couldn't take probiotics. They bloat me out. You want to get a rash.
You need to be in a stronger gut to be able to cope with these things. You need to take it more slowly.
Yeah,
bit by bit. Some people are a lot more sensitive.
So how do we get a stronger gut?
By eating good food. So we did want fruit, don't we? We did eat fruit. But the better way to eat fruit is not after put it first as a pudding, use it as a snack. Why? Because if your guts aren't feeling so good and you're slowish and not working, and then you eat this fruit, you haven't digested that meal. Those fruit sugars are going to be not digested nearly so quick. And what does the good sugar do when it's lurking around? It ferments. And off we go, we bloat.
How do you feel about lactose and drinking milk as human beings?
Lactose intolerance, people who are genetically lactose. So we've got milk. We've got a good food called milk.
Should we have milk because we're humans and it's for baby cows?
Well, yeah, but then, so we're a lot of things we're eating. It's better than milk is a healthy-ish food, if your body can cope with it. So we've got milk, which is one food with, in my line, two very different outcomes. We've got the allergy, and allergies are to do with the milk proteins and their caseinates and whey. And this is people who are allergic to milk often have runny noses, sinuses, awful things like that, and tummy problems. Lactose, so that's the allergy pathway with the protein. Lactose intolerance means we're physically not digesting this milk sugars. Now, the enzyme which digests, most of our digestive enzymes are made in an organ called the pancreas. Lactose isn't. It's made physically in our gut lining, in something called the microvilli. They call them brush enzymes. So if you've had, and that's because all these little sticky up things called microvilli in our gut. These are called the brush border. There's lots of good things there. But if you've had viral bacterial infections of the gut, too much imbalance of the microbiome, all of a sudden those little microvilli don't work very well, do they? No. And therefore you become short-term lactose intolerance. So NHS dietitians will talk about lactose intolerance for viral and bacterial infection, and Candida. No, sorry, COVID was certainly implicated in this mess. Yeah, that really attacked the gut quite badly on COVID. Yeah, because we tended to think mostly lungs, didn't we? Yeah, no, big little bugs get everywhere. I do wish they did. So yeah, so again, you become short-term lactose. If your microvilli are healed, which they do because they regenerate every 5 days, you should be able to have cow's milk. Yeah, and you don't have to have copious amounts of it, but it's a good form of calcium. Even though you get more calcium from green vegetables than you do from actual milk, because as you rightly say, milk, we didn't really drink milk after 7 or 8, did we? In human, we never really drank milk as cavemen.
No, it's for cows. Yeah.
So
Mother's milk, that's it. That's all you need, isn't it? You don't need milk.
do you know, up until 1990, IBS was a psychological disease.
I felt like I was making it up. My mom.
And now we've got IBS, we've got SIBO, where the bugs are lurking far too long in the small intestine because that's not working so well. And they should all end up in the large colon. That's where their job is, in the arid desert. And it's a fascinating little thing. But the good thing is that if we can simply eat simple, normal, healthy food, but it's not just that. The latest research is 30 different plant-based foods per week. That does include pepper and olive oil. Yeah, so 5 different nuts, that's 5 different plant-based foods. So, don't panic.
Yeah, variety is supposed to be very good, isn't it?
Of course it is, because we were grazers. And this is where grains came in. Grains were lots of different grains grown together, weren't they? And we didn't eat but now the vast majority of our food is just...
And now there are only like 12 grains that we farm,
now
commercially.
Yeah.
I read the book Ultra Processed People. Have you read it?
I've had lots. No.
Oh my gosh. That's when I stopped eating processed. Well, I knew it. I knew parts of it anyway, but it's just like, oh my gosh.
You're
cynicism behind
you're enlightened. You look at the people who come to me are pretty much like you. They know lots, but they can't pull it all together. The people we should be seeing are the people walking out there like zombies, who have no idea what it feels like to be vital. So basically, this is what these communities should be doing. Getting a big kitchen, getting groups of people walking around supermarkets, showing them the cheap foods, if their guts are ready for it. I'm only just a corner of things, people with IBS, they bloating, peas and legumes can certainly do that. So they are very gas producing if they are not digested in the right place. We know this. Also, they're massively healthy fibre for the gut. onions and garlic, very high on FODMAP because they've got a lot of sugar, remarkably healthy for the gut. So if we can get the gut a little bit better, then we wouldn't react to all this food so much. So the peristalsis is the name of the way food moves to our guts. It's like chomp, 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 really. So when we got food going in, peristalsis is quite active, dum, 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 dum. When we haven't got food in, peristalsis backs off of it. Then I called it the vacuum cleaner. It's not a vacuum cleaner, but there is a switch which gets turned on, and that cleans the gut out for us. So again, fasting is very useful. This is why we poo in the morning after we've fasted overnight. So fasting is a good tool. I can never remember 4, 2, 6, 8 and all of those really. Or eating within a window is a good.
That's what I do. You know, 12 till 8. And then, because I used to have like dinner at 9:30, that would be my favorite time to eat. But I could, but now I stop at 8. I'm not hungry afterwards, so it's fine. But I think there's been a massive difference.
Yeah, and that's probably because you've eaten the right foods.
Yeah.
It's like the people I feed intravenously, they don't eat, but we have bags of nutrition. And it's tailored to them specifically. So we do bloods and they do an algorithm, and the hospital come up with the right formula, what's in it. So the right proteins, the right fats, all the microvitamins. And if you have green tea or pomegranate juice, that is the preferred food for the night shift. So if you have the green tea as night, Acromantia likes that.
What, green tea, or what was the other one? Pomegranate.
Gosh, you can overdo anything. And this is what we do, don't we? This is good for us. Let's go put that. Oh, I don't feel so good. Let's forget it. Let's go somewhere else. Let's go somewhere else.
Everything in moderation.
It's not a bit of Kelly. I mean, it's like, having fermented fruit. I knew somebody who had a jar of it. Or I said, you're meant to use it like a dollop of ketchup. Not a whole blooming, and they felt ill.
Yeah, too much.
Because it's too much. Our bodies don't like it. And this happened in the hospital. They prescribed a drug, a probiotic called VFL, and it was 400 trillion microbes per sachet. And patients were having this advocated to have it 3 times a day.
No.
And these are people with no bowels. And they all hid them in the fridge. And I used to go in there and I said, why aren't you taking them? They said, just my food. So when I was talking, we had a team meeting to one of the gastroenterologists. I said, they don't take them. He said, why not? I said, it's like a bucket. I said, how do we get things in? We take them in gently. I said, we don't take a whole bucket of them, do you? And I said, you're just overloading people here.
There was one, what was the brand? I can't remember, but I have never bloated like that before. Got a huge rash, and I remember thinking, what is going on? That's why I don't take probiotics anymore. Just take the bit of drink a glass.
So there's another reason with guts, because in the same place, in the little microvilli in our gut where lactase is made, there's another enzyme called diamine oxidase. And this breaks down remarkably healthy food high in histamine. So I get a lot of people coming to me with rashes and headaches, and they've been all over the place. You may have heard people saying, I'm allergic to strawberries, I come up in a rash. They're not allergic. Allergy is that little white mast cell exploding and releasing histamine, but strawberries and tomatoes can be really high in histamine. Why? We see a lion, we've got 2 legs, we bolt. Poor old strawberry growing, bird and slug coming at it, really can't go anywhere. It then creates, as part of their defense mechanism, a very irritant chemical called histamine. So if the bird bites it, it's not for me, it flies. This is why you often grow your own, you see chunks out of it, don't you? If we are not making this one digestive enzyme called diamine oxidase, which breaks down all these really, really healthy foods high in histamine, all of a sudden you're getting a whole rash of this irritant chemical called histamine rushing through you. And it's not from allergy, it's not from a mast cell. It's because we're not making the enzyme. And that's pretty indicative because they've often got lactose intolerance, and it's to do with the gut lining, because that's where that enzyme is. And again, you go back to one of my patients with short bowel, bless him. I said to him once, I said, how are you getting on? He said, I'm doing well. He said, but I'm coming up, I'm itching. He said, I'm itching so much. Now, they're all lactose free. The hospital send them out on that. And I said, well, what are you eating, Fred? He said, I'm eating tomato soup. And I said, well, phone that. No, I don't deal their diets. I just do my job, my tip box. And I said, why don't you phone up the nutrition team and ask them if you can change your tomato soup for a tomato soup that doesn't have any other thing but tomatoes in it. I then get the phone call from the scary the hospital saying, Marlene, why are you, talking about diet? Because that's not your job. And I said, well, they're lactose intolerant. And she said, yeah. And I said, well, there is another enzyme there. And lo and behold, the nurse did go and look at this and came back and said, yeah, I can agree with that, man. Even a high-end gastroenterology nurse didn't know that. We don't know it all. Sometimes you come across knowledge, and if we're in the NHS, we've got to follow the knowledge in the NHS. You can't look at a FODMAP diet and take that out. We can't look at this and take that out. We've got to stick to the one or the other at this moment in time.